2019, Ishaan Shah was recognised at the Global Youth Awards for his incredible commitment to raising awareness of modern human slavery via Stolen Dreams, a website set up by Ishaan after, at age just 13, he saw a documentary that changed his life. Learning that children around the world were being exploited for labour and sex, he decided to raise the issue at school and soon realised that none of the students were aware that slavery still exists today. We're delighted that he's joining us for this month's Traffic edition of AwareNow to share his journey with us. Welcome, Ishaan. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well, thank you. I'm keeping safe and healthy, so can't complain.
Oh, great. Of course, in the UK, we're in yet another lockdown, so we've got plenty of time on our hands to do lots of things in that time and look after our mental health as well, which is great. Ishaan, you've done so much to raise awareness about modern human slavery in the last 4 years. What was it about that documentary that made you so determined?
Yeah, so watching that documentary about child trafficking and exploitation was the first time that I heard that slavery still exists today. And I learned about the transatlantic slave trade, so William Wilberforce's sort of heroic abolition back in 1833. But I didn't realize that actually slavery still existed today and continued to persist in our societies. And it's hidden in plain sight. So today there are over 45 million people trapped in some form of slavery globally. That's around 1 in every 200 people, which is a shocking statistic. 1 in 4 are children. And knowing that there are people out there, children held against their will, stripped of their dignity and their humanity and freedom, and knowing that I have the privilege and the resources and the capacity to actually help and take action, I knew that I had to do something. And that is the reason why I was so determined to take action to ensure that every human being has access to basic human rights, and so that the generations to come are growing up in a world where sort of slave-free is the normal.
Amazing. That is really, really shocking. I mean, 1 in 200 people is a bit mind-blowing. I guess the next question I want to ask you is, what would you say is the definition of modern human slavery and human trafficking? And also, who are the people that are most at risk of this exploitation?
So modern slavery is the act of forcing someone to work against their will through coercion, physical or mental threats. It's about restraining their freedom of movement physically or psychologically. It's when a victim is owned and controlled by an employer, and they're dehumanized and treated as a commodity or property that has been bought or sold. And slavery today actually involves a number of highly exploitative practices, including forced labor, bonded labor, organ trafficking, debt bondage, forced marriage, forced child labor, sex trafficking, human trafficking. So there are a lot of different forms of slavery that we see today. And human trafficking is one of the main forms of slavery. And that is the act of recruiting, transporting, harboring, or receiving victims of slavery through force, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power. It's about exploiting vulnerabilities. But human trafficking is sort of the act of transporting someone into a form of slavery for the purpose of, say, sexual exploitation or forced organ harvesting, for example. It's about transporting people across international borders. It could be within a country, or even transporting someone from one hotel room to another is considered human trafficking. So slavery is sort of a very broad umbrella term that encompasses a wide range of exploitative practices happening across the world. And one of the key things to remember is that anyone could be a victim of modern slavery, because wherever there are vulnerabilities, traffickers are ready to exploit them, whether those be psychological, health vulnerabilities, economic vulnerabilities, and traffickers are ready to exploit. And with the rise of social media as well, traffickers can exploit people online, which means that you can be exploited from the other side of the world, commonly for the purposes of sex. And having said that, those in more vulnerable communities and vulnerable countries such as India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, those living in poverty with access to little education, healthcare, the impacts of climate change and natural disaster, people living in these areas and those who are adversely affected by all these other global issues that we face today are at a greater risk of falling into the hands of traffickers. So, for example, in India, every form of modern slavery exists there, which is shocking. Additionally, you have 71% of victims of slavery are women and girls. So that's 1 in every 130 women and girls globally are subjected to some form of modern slavery. 99% of victims of sexual exploitation are women and girls. And so these gender imbalances that women and girls face across the world from birth means that they're disproportionately affected by this crime. But also other marginalized groups, including those from the LGBT plus community, are at risk of being exploited. So really, in essence, wherever there are vulnerabilities, traffickers are ready to exploit them. And of course, those who are faced by greater vulnerabilities are at greater risk of being trafficked.
Okay. Yeah, of course. And quite often people don't even know that they are victims of slavery, which is, quite alarming, really. So you've just shared some amazing facts and figures with me then, and you're always sharing these on your socials. Some of those are really, really quite shocking, especially the one about women and girls. What for you is the most alarming statistic, and that you think people need to be made aware of?
Generally, for many people, they know about slavery of the past and historic slavery, so the transatlantic slave trade, and that sort of thing, but they don't realize that slavery still exists today and that it's such a big problem. I mean, 45 million people trapped in some form of slavery, and that's just an estimate. That's just an estimation, because the true figure is probably likely to be higher due to the hidden nature of the crime. But that's more people in slavery than at any point in human history, and that's excluding the over 150 million children engaged in child labor as well. So what I found from my activism is that usually people are quite shocked at the fact that slavery still exists today. I mean, it's not just children who are shocked, but adults. And I was speaking to a group of MPs recently as well, and even they were shocked that slavery still exists. And they don't even know that it's an issue today. And these are the people who are running our country. So awareness, as with any other global issue, is really key. And another alarming aspect, it's not necessarily a statistic, but an aspect of modern slavery is that it's happening closer than we think. It's in the clothes we wear, the foods we eat, and it's potentially even happening on our high streets. It's happening right on our doorsteps. So this is not just an issue happening in faraway countries and faraway communities, but it's happening every day. We're encountering it every day. Fast fashion brands like Nike, Zara, Primark, TK Maxx, food companies like Cadbury's, McDonald's, Burger King, at the supermarkets that we buy from, the electronics that we use provided by Apple, Samsung, and Microsoft. These companies are all profiting off of the exploitation of people. But even sort of the car washes and nail bars on our high streets, the cleaners in our schools, universities, the hotels that we visit, and these are all people who could be at risk of being victims of slavery. So this is an issue that's not happening, over there. It's happening right here. We're encountering it every day. I mean, a recent report last year by Justice and Care confirmed that there are over 100,000 victims of slavery in the UK alone, which is a shocking statistic, and it's almost 10 times greater than what the government had previously estimated. So slavery is happening closer than you think.
Goodness me. So, over 45 million. And the fact that you said that, that there's more of it going on than ever before is quite shocking when you think that most people do, when they think about slavery, think about it being a past issue. How can people reading this join the fight against slavery? And also, how can those, we mentioned that some people aren't even aware that they are victims. How can they protect themselves from potential threats?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite questions, because I think over the past 4 years, what I've learned is that it's really important to acknowledge that despite this being a really harrowing and barbaric and complex and sort of dehumanizing topic, it's really important to introduce a lot of hope into this conversation, because there is hope, because we as individuals and as citizens can play a major part in the fight against slavery. And there's 5 ways in which you can do so, and these are my top 5. I guess familiarizing yourself with what slavery is today and how to spot the signs of exploitation, which can help to keep ourselves safe and also others around us safe too. So you can visit Stolen Dreams, the website. It's got a page on there that has information about how to spot the signs, but also Unseen UK, which is a UK-based anti-slavery organization. They have a phenomenal page which explains sort of all the signs of exploitation for the various forms of modern slavery that we see today. But it's about starting these conversations. I guess slavery, especially modern slavery, isn't a topic that's usually spoken about today. So having these conversations, starting these dialogues, and encouraging people to take action is sort of the starting point, and it's really important. And secondly, I would advise people to stay safe online, especially during this pandemic where a lot of people are moving online for school, for work. Traffickers are using the digital world to exploit people, especially young people. So being aware of your e-safety, not talking to people that you don't know, staying safe on dating apps as well, and familiarizing yourself with how to spot the signs of cyber trafficking and sexual exploitation and grooming are really important. And a tip for a young person especially is to have conversations with your friends and families about what you're doing online, because this helps to keep you and others around you safe. Thirdly, you can write to your local or national politicians. Government policy is instrumental in tackling slavery. So establishing policy on an international level that ensures that companies are being transparent about what's going on in their supply chains and really getting them to start taking action around eradicating supply chain slavery, holding them accountable, and also ensuring that sort of on an international scale, government policy is able to protect victims of slavery who have perhaps been trafficked from abroad and find themselves in a new country. Usually traffickers will take away any official identification, so passports, for example. And so upon rescue, they don't have any documentation, they're in the country illegally. So ensuring that government policy protects them is really important, because there's a risk that they could be deported back to their home country, or there's a risk that they'll be re-trafficked again. But on a more local level, we can write to our sort of local representatives and get them to adopt strategies that tackle modern slavery within the community. And this could be through raising awareness, training emergency services on how to respond appropriately, but also ensuring that on a local level, governments are working with local organizations to ensure that there's safe houses, for example, that are established, and support networks for survivors to reintegrate them back into society in a very safe and effective manner. And that sort of leads on to the next sort of tip that I'd give is to support anti-slavery organizations, because if you can donate to organizations that are working to end slavery through lobbying businesses, shaping government policy, and supporting survivors, that's really important, because grassroots organizations rely on donations to keep safe houses and support programs running across the world. You can start a fundraiser or even a sponsored event. Another way we can do this and support organizations is by saving, sharing, and commenting, engaging with their content on social media to help with their engagement and sort of Instagram algorithms and all this sort of thing, to really help get their messages out there. And for a full list of some incredible anti-slavery organizations across the world, there's a page on Stolen Dreams labeled Allies, and that gives you a full list of organizations who are doing incredible things across the world to drive positive action around this issue. And finally, this is probably my favorite tip, which is to consume consciously. As I mentioned earlier, most of the products we consume every day are likely to have been produced using some form of slavery. And with brands constantly looking for cheaper sources of labor, slavery is often the solution to increasing profit margins, unfortunately. And this means that the industry of slavery makes over 120 billion pounds in illegal profits, which is a huge amount. It's almost double the net worth of the entire British royal family, which is crazy to think. It's quite a shocking statistic. So if you can buy ethical clothing, that's great. But an alternative is buying secondhand, buying locally produced goods, thrifting, sharing, and reducing the rate in which we consume to help slow the demand. Those are some great ways that we can counter slavery and supply chain slavery in particular. And one of the tips I do give to people is that whenever you are about to buy something new, always ask yourself, do I really need this? And who made this? And if that company can't tell you, then demand action, call them out on social media, write to them, pester them until you can get some form of response. So there are a number of ways that we can all come together and help tackle this issue. These small acts and these small lifestyle changes can really make a difference.
That's brilliant. That's really great to know, Ishaan. And I think that's a really important point, about as consumers, we can vote with our feet, really, and we can create change by what we shop. Because if we decide that we're not going to buy the products, then it effectively stops them from being able to do that, because it's a supply and demand situation. So I think it's really, really important that people do that. I know that there are a lot of companies that are very ethical and sustainable, and if you look into their stories or look at, they've got badges on the website, so that's a really good way to be able to know. And we'll definitely put a link to that page that you mentioned within the article, because I think it's really important for people to go and read that and find out more information about it, because I know that we all want to eradicate it if it's possible, and if everybody does their bit, then at least we can bring those very shocking numbers down. Ishaan, I'm absolutely in awe of your achievements and your passion at such a young age. What's next for Stolen Dreams, and what are your own dreams for the future?
Thank you. I think with this whole global pandemic and everything going on with lockdown and the uncertainty about exams in the summer, I think I'm just trying to make it to the end of the week, I guess. But for Stolen Dreams, I think we just want to continue to engage people with actually driving positive action around this issue. It's not a topic that's spoken about very often. The media doesn't cover it very often either. So we want to start opening opening conversations about these issues and ensure that action is actually taken by us as citizens, by businesses, and by governments. And stolen dreams will work and will continue to work until every human being has access to these basic human rights. But it's going to be, we recognize it's going to be a challenging journey, especially navigating these rough waters and all the hurdles that COVID is posing. But it's exciting to see how the anti-slavery movement is progressing and to partner and learn from and grow with all these incredible organizations that are doing tremendous work. So really, it's just about, raising awareness, but also ensuring that action is taken on a local level, on a national level, but also an international level too, especially working towards the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. I read an article recently that said if we're going to meet goal 8.7, which is to end modern slavery in all its forms, we're going to have to free 10,000 slaves every day until 2030, which is another shocking statistic, quite unrealistic. But I'm sure that the way the anti-slavery movement is progressing and the way that organizations across the world are working together and seeing that actually people are starting to learn about this issue and change their consuming habits and consumption patterns. By 2030, we're hoping that we will see and we'll be living in a world where the rates of modern slavery have decreased significantly.
Yes, and as you mentioned before, it's really important, I think, that everybody does their bit, because with everything, it starts with awareness. And so hopefully people that are watching this or reading the article will share as much as possible so that we can reach more people and make more people aware of what's going on in the world. Really, really important issue. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Ishaan, and thank you to everyone tuning in. Of course, we'll share those links. We'll share the link to Stolen Dreams so that you can find out more and support. We will be back again next month, but it's goodbye for now. Thank you so much, Ishaan, and I will speak to you very soon.
Thank you.